Fox News alert now. The State Department moments ago saying a U.S. diplomat will leave India after the government there demanding expulsion in retaliation for the arrest and strip search of an Indian diplomat here in New York. This comes after the diplomat at the center of this matter was reportedly given clearance by the State Department and a federal court to return to her country after being indicted for lying about her housekeeper's wages on a visa application. Christian Whiton, former State Department senior advisor, author of the book Smart Power Between Diplomacy and War. And Christian, welcome back here. So there's a development, the U.S. government sending somebody home in exchange for this woman. What are we to make of this now?
Well, it's the end of what was becoming a pretty ugly diplomatic tiff between a country that is either an ally or at least certainly is not an adversary, India. You know, this started off as an arrest of someone who there was probable cause to think lied on a federal form and was mistreating one of her domestic employees, paying her way less than the minimum wage. And, the U.S. hosts more diplomats than any country. We've got all of the diplomats in Washington, but also at the UN, at consulates around the U.S., and not everyone has full diplomatic immunity. There are different gradations of diplomatic immunity. This woman was a consular official. That's a step down, so she was subject to U.S. courts' jurisdiction. They've now found a way out of that, and she has artfully
Christian,
gone home.
I don't know if this is the end. You've got an energy secretary canceling a trip to India. What did India do? They shut down a swimming pool for Americans who use a pool in New Delhi. You'd think that government's been immature through all this. Yeah, well, they've done much worse than closing the swimming pool, too, or closing off access to it. They removed security barriers from around the U.S. Embassy, which really is childish behavior. India's been an independent country for more than 65 years, but in many ways still has a chip on its shoulder, still is constantly looking for slights. And at the end of the day, they should have been more circumspect about this. This woman did violate a law. There was a prima facie case that she did, and was trying to import India's, essentially, its caste system into the United States, which is something we have to be on the lookout for with diplomats hunting laws, especially diplomats accredited to the United Nations. Yeah, so, there's a lot of wrong on their side. See, what you're suggesting here is that if she goes home and the U.S. makes a move in New Delhi, you think that's where the matter ends? And it's settled, Christian? I think so. I think this is an effort by, the way they got out of this was to accredit her to the UN. She was previously just a consular official in New York, people who handle birth certificates, visas, things like that. So by accrediting her to the UN, they increased her level of diplomatic immunity, thus removing the court's jurisdiction from her case, thus allowing her to go home. So what that tells me is both governments realized this was getting out of hand. Frankly, there's a question, too, why an example was made of this woman as opposed to, say, a Chinese or a Russian diplomat. Diplomats from one of an adversary of the U.S. rather than a notional ally or non-enemy. So I think this is an effort to put this behind us. Christian, thank you for your time. We'll see whether or not that's where it goes. Christian Whiton with us today. Thank you, sir. Thanks, Bill.